Marky Billson here, Tri-City Sports Now. And you heard the commercial for Asian House. And really, if you haven't eaten lunch yet, good news, you can get it. And I even got a lunch, calling it up until 3 o'clock hour at one time, just picked it up. But really, you heard that about the Happy Bucks. You mentioned the appetizers. That's things like Crab Lagoon, little, crab puffs you get with Chinese food, egg rolls, vegetables. What am I going to have? Let me recommend to you the sushi at Asian House. I mean, sushi for lunch. It is, I think, the perfect lunch because it's very high in protein, doesn't give you that, 2:30 lull, which could be, in this case, a 4 o'clock lull if you're eating lunch right now. But I'm going to go there. I will give you the review. Yeah, I like some spicy food. I live in South Texas, for crying out loud. I like some spicy food. But the Kung Pao beef that I had, Kung Pao beef, how exotic is that? Wasn't overwhelmingly spicy. Because I know that isn't a real big thing around here. So it's not too spicy. It's not too mild. It's just right. Asian House right there. West Market Street, Johnson City on the way to Jonesboro. Shops at West Market. Told you that I was going to tell you a little bit about what Clemson is doing before we went away. This is our final segment on Tri-City Sports Now. And here's the deal. You know that I have always said on this show that the coach that doesn't release injury information or doesn't, the coach doesn't release injuries is the coach that plays injured players. He can scream at me all he wants about his integrity, but folks, we had on this show, Mladen Armas, did he play with a concussion? And his assistant coach told me that he did suffer his head injury that kept him out of the CIT game against the Wofford Terriers in a Southern Conference tournament, and he was on the floor at the end of that game, you tell me. And then Steve Forbes told me, as he was barking at me, how dare you question my integrity, about Armas being cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs after the game. You tell me. Now, did Forbes do it intentionally? Maybe not. I kind of doubt it. But it goes into, look, sometimes these things happen, and maybe full disclosure is better than how dare you question my integrity. That's why I don't like what's going on at Clemson. Clemson Athletic Department started asking each other tough questions. This, according to a story in the Post and Courier, because just before they played in the Cotton Bowl in the college football playoffs, 3 of their players were suspended. Dexter Lawrence, that was a big loss. Although they won a national title, so how big was it? But yeah, Dexter Lawrence, Braden Galloway, and Zach Gillia ingested the performance-enhancing drug Ostarine, and they were suspended for the college football playoff game on December 29th. But Clemson will not share their findings with the public. And they'll give a bunch of stupid excuses, and I don't buy any of them. If the school knows how the players came into contact with an illegal PED, if the source was inside or outside the athletic department, or if the problem was more widespread, it's not saying, way to cover your bases, huh? I mean, that just makes you look guilty, doesn't it? Clemson cites a privacy privacy law, not a role, but I can say here's the privacy law. The NCAA appeal was led by the student-athlete's representative. Any investigation into the source of Osterine contamination is part of that appeal, and therefore a student record subject to the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. That is what Clemson told the Charleston Post and Courier this week. Remember when I told you the Post and Courier was a really good newspaper? Wouldn't you like to see that? I mean, I think it could happen at Bristol. Some of the other papers are just, comes to sports. What's the game story? And so behind the times. Osterine is a substance. It's a subject too, I suppose. We're talking about performance-enhancing drugs, but it is a substance, is Osterine, banned by the FDA for human use. It is a performance-enhancing drug classified as a selective androgen receptor modulator. Don't ask me exactly what that is. But anyway, Galloway was a sophomore tight end, Gillia a senior offensive lineman. They missed the Cotton Bowl and national title game. Lawrence missed the 2 playoff games, but then he went to the New York Giants as their first-round pick. Remember, I did say that was a big loss for Clemson, theoretically. But then again, they won the national title, right? So how big was it, 20 random actually fewer than 20 random Clemson players were picked for a random drug test. There were, of course, 125 on the Tigers roster. Now, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, and I've had coaches say this to me, and I'm just not buying it. It applies to the privacy of student education records, would apply to info specifically about Lawrence, Galloway, and Gillia. It would not prevent Clemson from releasing a general look at such things as the results of in-house PED tests during the playoffs or opinions from outside experts if either of those situations applied in this unusual case. I can't tell you how many times it was, coaches hiding behind FERPA not to report injuries. And as I said to you before, the coach that doesn't report injuries is the coach that will play injured players. It's as simple as that. And also, South Carolina Press Association attorney Taylor M. Smith IV, I'm Marcus Kitchen Billson IV, says it's true that FERPA protects the education records of students, but it is also true that the use of any exemption in the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act is not mandatory. Now, I would imagine it would also go in Tennessee and all this. In this case, it seems the players involved, and perhaps other players not mentioned, would provide consent to the school to release those records protected under FERPA so the public can be made aware of how those tests were failed. Now, that's PED. I've heard coaches, they will use FERPA and use it as, we can't tell you what the injury situation on our team is. There was that gamesmanship that ETSU tried to do in the CIT tournament where they actually listed Mladen Armas and Jerome Rodriguez in the game as starters, and then they were, they were under concussion protocol. Didn't tell the SID that, they closed practice. And you do that, you really look guilty, don't you? Yeah, you really look guilty. Maybe you just ought to say, look, I had Armas out there, and he was playing, halfway deep. I didn't realize it at the time. Because there have been, probably get away with that. Especially the way that Steve Forbes is thought of around here. But then Armas goes and transfers, and, it becomes a bigger thing, and the cover-up, and the yelling at the fearless reporter who uncovers that all. Yours truly, Marky Billson. There you are. All right, but I saw that at Clemson, and I just could not believe, trying to hide behind. It just shows you another scummy thing of college athletics, to be brutally honest with you. And I think it is absolutely time for an injury report in college athletics. Perhaps it will happen because of more gambling being involved in sports. The prop bets or whatever. I mean, now that it's legal, that's why they say there's always an injury report in the NFL, right? I happen to think it protects the player. And even with the injury report in the NFL, it doesn't always work out that way. It was Todd Gurley. Why wasn't he playing in the Super Bowl and in the NFC title?